主义的污蔑，他有力回击。
We perceive the indifference of those administrations regarding the region. So now it's not a matter of complaint.
萨尔瓦多副总统费利克斯·乌略亚接受高端访谈独家专访，敬请收看。
关注国际焦点，洞察世界风云。大家好，欢迎收看本期高端访谈，我是主持人王冠。本期我们要走进一个历史悠久、风光秀丽的国家，它经历了近300年的殖民统治和几10年的战乱，犯罪率居高不下，在很长一段时间内，它被认为是这个世界上最危险的国家之一。而如今，在经历了系列扫黑行动之后，萨尔瓦多是一番怎样的景象？它正在经历怎样的变迁？2018年，萨尔瓦多断绝了同中国台湾的所谓外交关系，同中国建交。如今的中萨关系又得到了怎样的发展？今天，让我们一起走进对话嘉宾萨尔瓦多副总统费利克斯·乌略亚博士，一起听听他对国家发展的思考。
2018年8月21日，萨尔瓦多政府顺应历史大势和时代潮流，做出了一个重要抉择。断绝同中国台湾地区的所谓外交关系，和中国签署建交公报，建立了大使级外交关系。在这份联合公报中，萨尔瓦多共和国政府承认世界上只有一个中国，中华人民共和国政府是代表全中国的唯一合法政府，台湾是中国领土不可分割的一部分。建交后，萨尔瓦多这个位于中美洲心脏地带的国家，从此开始广泛吸引更多中国人的关注。萨尔瓦多西接危地马拉，东连洪都拉斯，南临太平洋。它历史悠久，是玛雅文明的发源地之一。它景色旖旎，以火山之国、咖啡之国闻名于世。早在上世纪70年代，就成为了世界第5大咖啡生产国和第4大出口国。
Dr. Felix Ulloa, Vice President of El Salvador, welcome to Leaders Talk on China Media Group. It is an honor to have you with us.
Thank you for having me. It is a pleasure also for me.
Mr. Vice President, we're marking the 5th anniversary of the diplomatic relations between China and El Salvador. How would you define and characterize the current state of our relationship?
Well, as you said, even though it wasn't this government who started the diplomatic relations, but we inherited this relation with the People's Republic of China, and we feel that more than comfortable because we have profit of all these relations that has represent for our country a great opportunity to amplify our relation worldwide. So China is a great partner. It has been for us good support for some project that we are developing, and it is an open opportunity to increase our international trade also.
What would be some of the key words that comes to your mind when you describe this relationship?
Well, talking about keywords, I would say 3 keywords. One is cooperation, second is solidarity, and third could be friendship.
Great, awesome. Mr. Vice President, you mentioned the previous administration. Actually, in 2018, the previous government of El Salvador decided to shift diplomatic recognition from Taipei to Beijing. And when your government took office in 2019, you actually sticked with the One China principle. What kind of calculations with it?
Well, we are following the path that all the international community, the vast majority of the UN members follow this principle of the One China. So it could be coherent with international policy and international foreign relations to recognize the People's Republic of China as the nation that represents the One China principle. China is not only a great nation, a great player in international scenario, also a member of the Permanent Council of the United Nations, but also, as I said, it represents for El Salvador an opportunity to strengthen the relation with good friends, the China's nation.
Just out of curiosity, was there pressure from Washington back then, asking your country to perhaps think twice about your One China principle?
Well, I don't know if they did it with the previous government, but for us, we will never accept any pressure from any country because we are a sovereign nation and we decide who are the countries that we open or maintain diplomatic relations. As the President Bukele said, El Salvador will maintain diplomatic relations with all the nations in the world, taking care only the well-being of our people. So that is our horizon, and we don't accept any pressure that could attempt with the sovereignty of the Salvadorian people.
Dr. Ulloa, I want to move on and talk about our trade relations. China is still El Salvador's second largest import origin. Every 1 in 6 items the Salvadorians bought was actually from China. Even amidst the pandemic in 2021, bilateral trade exceeded $1.7 billion. That is an increase of 56%. Actually, your country's goods are pretty popular in China, I can say for a fact. For example, the Salvadoran coffee, which is available in many cafes, including a cafe downstairs where I live here in Beijing, China. Going forward, how do you hope bilateral trade can move to the higher level?
Well, thank you for remarking the quality of our coffee. We are aware that we produce one of the best coffees in the world, not by the amount, because the quality. So, and this is one of the 3 main products that we export to China. So the idea is to increase the level of our exports because in addition to coffee, we also export to China the sugar from the sugar cane with the commercial institution, the Chamber of Commerce from China, Chamber of Commerce of El Salvador. Our new ambassador appointed in China is playing a good role trying to make this interchange between the private sector of El Salvador, private sector of China, and taking the government inside in order to facilitate in the legal frameworks, in the tax issues, all the operation that could give more a boost of this commercial interchange and the international trade.
中国与萨尔瓦多建交以来，双方在各领域交流合作取得历史性突破。2018年11月，两国签署“一带一路”合作谅解备忘录等13项合作协议。2019年底，萨尔瓦多总统布克尔访华，双方签署多项务实合作领域框架性协议。2021年的最后一天，布克尔总统在多个社交平台宣布，萨尔瓦多将与中国合作修建新的国家体育场。他写道：“这项合作得到了习主席的直接认可，也是中国与萨尔瓦多人民友谊的范例。”来自多个拉美国家的网友对国家体育场项目表达了赞誉。萨尔瓦多的兄弟们，你们不再是小国，你们在发展等诸多方面都成为了巨人。来自哥伦比亚的朋友给你们一个大大的拥抱。对于拉丁美洲其他国家来说，这是新时代政治领域的一个榜样。来自哥斯达黎加的祝福。这个体育场很漂亮，会成为全美洲最壮观的体育场之一。祝贺萨尔瓦多的兄弟们！来自墨西哥的问候。
Right, and also, as I understand, China is also working with your country in a number of infrastructure projects, a library, a soccer stadium, among other things. How are they going, Mr. Vice President?
Well, so far, so good. But in addition, other project that deals with some treatment for waters in one of our more emblematic project, which is developing the tourism. So that means that in the beaches, in the areas that's the tourism is being attracting because we have the best spot for surfing. Actually, we have been a host for international championship of surf. But the problem of the treatment of waters to go to the beaches is one of our main challenges. China has been in agreement to support us and bringing us all the plans for doing the proper treatment. So we appreciate that. We thank the government and the China people for this support, and it will give us, with no doubt, an input and a boost to our economic development.
Talking about China's investment in Latin America, some commentators and politicians accused China's presence in the region as neo-colonialism, right? For example, in 2018, an official in Washington warned El Salvador that China's investment in your country was to, quote unquote, facilitate dominance and dependence, not partnership. Is that how you see it? I mean, is that how you feel, Mr. Vice President?
Not at all. We don't see in that way all the presence of China in the region. They are a partner. I regret to hear the opinion from somebody coming from Washington, basically because historically it has been Washington who has leader and has dominated the economic relation with Latin America. But since a while ago, when our government in Washington decides that there will be more focus on the Middle East, they turn their back to the region. So that is the issue now, because we regret that's our historically relation with Washington, in which we perceive the indifference or at least the lack of interest of those administrations regarding the region. So now it's not a matter of complaint. I don't see in any way that China is implementing a new colonialism policy.
Mr. Vice President, talking about El Salvador, through the Western media lenses, usually you hear about, illegal immigration to the north, the gangs, corruption, and most recently, Bitcoination, of course. In all fairness, I want to ask you this question. What do you think are some of the finer and more nuanced aspects of your country in the international media spotlight did not really focus on?
From the mainstream in the West, let's say in the United States or some European media, reports some issues that are not the truth. Sometimes I have given some interviews to some of them, and I have to regret that sometimes they misquote me when they take some phrases out of context in order to adapt the narrative, negative narrative against this government. And this is really a bad practices. I have called them that the press should be independent, should be professional. So that is our challenge. Yeah. But as I repeatedly said, the lie has short legs, and the truth always reaches it out. So we think that having the recognition of the Salvadorian people, that the President Bukele has over 85% of approval.
Like you said, seeing is believing. Dr. Ulloa, I know that you have 4 advanced degrees. You studied in Spain, France, and the US, correct?
That's correct.
We know that you haven't been to China yet. Do you hope to come visit China one day? And what is the one thing about China, let me ask you, what is the one thing about China that intrigues you and interests you the most?
Well, unfortunately, I have never been in China. I hope in the coming future I will have the opportunity to visit the big country. I mean, we would like to see how do you develop all these new industries, the new technology. We are really interested in knowing how do you move from being a third world country, underdeveloped country, rural country, in a very short period of time, becoming one of the most remarkable superpowers in the world, not only in economic terms, but also in industry, technology, and leading the different processes worldwide. So that could be an inspiration for a small country like mine, that we can follow that path, moving from the way we are to the first world to developed countries. It's not the size of the country. The key issue is to develop the talent of the population. That's what we'll appreciate if we have the opportunity to receive some training for our students in China. As I did, what you mentioned, I received my postgraduate studies in Spain, in France, in the United States. And that's allowed me to have a more broad perspective. And the idea is to see the horizon and see the world is for you if you have the skills and the opportunity to develop and to reach out your aims and your goals.
对萨尔瓦多和拉丁美洲来说，想要在世界舞台闪耀，首先需要跨越历史和现实的藩篱。因为自1823年提出门罗主义以来，美国一直视拉美为自己的后院。他30多次军事介入拉美国家，强行输出美式民主，大搞经济掠夺，甚至策动政权颠覆，在该地区犯下了滔天罪行。
We used to talk about, when I was a kid in college, about America's backyard. It's not America's backyard. Everything south of the Mexican border is America's front yard.
2022年6月，第9届美洲峰会在美国洛杉矶举行。峰会召开之前，美国就霸道地单方面宣布，因为所谓民主问题，将不邀请古巴、尼加拉瓜和委内瑞拉领导人参会。美方的做法遭到多个美洲国家领导人的批评，萨尔瓦多等多国领导人也纷纷拒绝出席，这让此次会议成为美洲峰会创立以来参会领导人最少的一届。如今，在外交方面，萨尔瓦多强调互不干涉内政，支持在平等、公正与合作基础上建立国际新秩序。2021年5月，萨尔瓦多总统布克尔在社交媒体上转发中国对拉美地区提供新冠疫苗援助的消息时，就表示，中国现在和将来都是萨尔瓦多的朋友。他们愿在相互尊重、平等、没有政治条件的情况下，帮助我们抗击疫情，深化友好交流。
Talking about the COVID-19 pandemic over the past few years, there has been quite a bit of solidarity actually between China and El Salvador. Talk to us about that.
Well, in fact, we received from China a donation of over 150,000 vaccines during the pandemic. And they were willing to sell us over 2 million units of the vaccine, the Sinovac, as well as we bought other from other countries. But the first package of vaccine that we received, they came from China. With the Sinovac, my first 2 shots were Sinovac, and we thank the opportunity in which we received those vaccination programs, which allows to vaccinate almost over 65% of the population, wow, which is the highest level according to International Health Organization. So we reached one of the higher standards in this matter. And thanks to the solidarity of China, because it was the first country who sent us the vaccine.
How do you look at the role of people-to-people and educational exchange between China and Salvador? Do you think it can move to even a higher level going forward?
We love that. I mean, this is something that we truly appreciate if we receive from China the opportunity to train our professionals, for post-grad studies, or even to receive young people, undergraduate students in some Chinese universities that will allow us to learn from you. Because as you know better than me, China was, in the recent past, a rural country, underdeveloped country, which is prepared to do this big jump and becoming one of the economic superpowers in the world, but not only because economic itself, it's because improving and strengthening the economic processes inside China allows them to move forward in other areas, in the space, technology, in other areas. So for us, this is important because this government, the President Bukele, has bet to close the gap in the digital field. El Salvador probably is the only country in the region who is given laptops, tablets, and all these type of devices to the students and teachers for the public sector, all the public schools, because we are fully aware that we are into the fourth industrial revolution, and the digital era is demanding. I mean, all these new resources and the TICs, the technologies of information and communication, are part of our agenda to fill this gap and to close that gap.
Fair to say that in the digital space, there's great potential for our two countries to work closer together. Mr. Vice President, how do you look at China's role in the world, and especially in the developing world?
Well, you know that the world at this moment faces a big challenge. The last report, one of the last reports from the United Nations, which called the next frontier, the era of the Anthropocene, explained that the planet is at a level that the negative effects of the climate changes and all this situation, the management of the natural resources, the way that the human being, we have abused from our planet Earth, and there is not planet B. There is not a planet B. So this is the only planet that we have. So we have to take care of that. That we appreciate when the leaders, a big leader like the president, recognize and is aware about that role and presented an initiative to relieve this type of problem. And we, as a Salvadorian in Central America, we live in a region that have suffered and still suffering the effects of the climate changes. So we would like to have this kind of leadership in the world, to be aware and to present the initiative and to make it happen.
Dr. Felix Ulloa, Vice President of El Salvador, thank you so much for joining us at this hour on Leaders Talk.
Thank you for the opportunity and my best wishes for you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. 乌略亚副总统对国家发展的回答，其实可以总结成一句话，那就是要摆脱历史桎梏，顺应时代潮流。我们也看到了萨尔瓦多正在努力对内打造安全稳定的社会环境，对外主动寻求平等多元的外交关系。拉美有句谚语叫“顺利时节交朋友，逆境来临验朋友”。中萨两国在地理位置上虽然相距甚远，但在很多务实合作领域却在越走越近。双方都希望未来能够继续增进互信，深化合作，携手应对挑战。好，感谢您收看本期。